Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our Develop podcast. This is your host, Danielle Reynolds, and I hope everyone is staying inspired as we head into these summer months. Joining us today, we have Frank Iannelli, who is our Managing Director on the Strategic Consulting Services team. Frank is based out of the Fort Worth office and has more than 30 years of diversified business experience providing strategic, operational, and financial consulting to executive management teams. Frank has had the privilege of working with a lot of different people, companies, and industries, so we are going to pick his brain on best practices to adopt to be successful while also finding joy in what we do. Frank, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Danielle. Pleasure to be here.
I'm excited for this conversation. So you ready to just dive right in?
I am. This is a topic I'm very passionate about, very dear to my heart. So I'm anxious to talk about this.
Love it. Well, let's start and let's take it back first. Tell us a little bit about your childhood, where you grew up. Did you always know that you were going to end up in a business type environment and role?
Well, no, did not. So my parents were born in Italy and we grew up in New York. When my parents came to the United States, they didn't speak English and they worked really hard building several different businesses. They didn't go to college. So we saw early on, my brothers and I, the commitment my parents had and the hard work and how they can create different businesses if they work hard and have a passion. When growing up in New York, we worked in the family business on evenings and weekends and kind of just did everything that it took to help them out. I enjoyed that part of it. When I was in high school, we moved to South Texas, which was a big culture change for us. And then I attended UT for undergrad and graduate school. So I didn't know really what I wanted to do when I grew up, still don't, but I knew it was somehow going to be related to business. Didn't know if it was going to be own my own business, consult, be part of a management team, but it was going to be directly related to it.
Awesome. Well, I'll give you a pass on going to UT. I'm a Sooner, but do love the state of Texas. It sounds like, from an early stage, you really learned about work ethic and also this entrepreneurial type spirit growing up with the family and doing the family business. So I think those are a lot of great takeaways that are probably still things that you use to this day. So you began your career at Arthur Andersen. Tell us a little bit about that experience, especially what you specifically learned as a young professional and how it would then set you up for future success.
Sure. So when I was interviewing as a senior at UT, I wanted to be part of a big firm, the Big Four, but I wanted to be part of a small office where I could work with mid-market companies. And so I chose to go to San Antonio. Didn't know if I wanted to do audit, tax, litigation, consulting. So again, because I wanted somehow have my own business, I thought tax would be most relevant and useful. And so I joined the tax practice at Arthur Andersen in San Antonio. The culture at Andersen at that time was we all worked as a team and we all helped each other. It was a great experience, and I'm still friends with some of the guys over 35 years. In fact, I had lunch with one of the guys I started with last week.
Love that. Well, we always encourage our young professionals too to start building your network now and why that's so important. So appreciate you touching on that as well.
Sure. And so since we had a small group and I believe at that time was the only single guy, I got put on special projects. And so in my 2 years at Arthur Andersen, I did, a handful of tax returns. Everything I did was something different. And so one of the first things I did which is pretty cool, is I got volunteered to be put on a project where I acted as a production accountant for an IMAX movie, Alamo, The Price of Freedom. And so this was one of our real estate clients who was producing a movie in Brackville, Texas, and they needed someone to go out there to be a staff accountant. So I spent my summer working on this production, which has played every hour on the hour for over 35 years at the River Center Mall in San Antonio, and my name is on the credits. But from that experience, I got to see how business works, how payroll works, and how accounting works, and how finance works. And so I kind of got that bug. And from that point on, I said, I think I'm going to go to grad school and kind of enhance and further develop my skills to enable me to run a business one day.
Love that. So how important do you think it is, you touched on taking on those early opportunities in your career. How important is that to your development?
So I think for me, it was huge, especially because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And so my mindset then and is today is to accumulate as many tools in my tool belt to be successful. And so be put in uncomfortable situations, learn from that, and then kind of move on. And so they were building blocks. And after I did one, then I got on the next one, found myself after 2 years, I really knew nothing about tax, even though I was a tax student, but I knew about how business operated. And so went to graduate school, got my MBA in finance, and with the thoughts of I was going to go to Wall Street and be this big investment banker. But that's not really what I wanted to do. Just through relationships developed, I found myself back at Arthur Andersen in Dallas with a new group that was being formed. It's a specialty consulting group, which consisted of bankruptcy, corporate finance, and litigation. And me and two of my buddies from grad school were the first 3 hires. And so now we really got involved with how companies operate. And what I learned there was, again, the Andersen culture, teamwork, collaboration, and building relationship. But the most important thing I learned was the aspect of being curious. And I found myself in a situation where I spent 3-4 months working with a client, building financial models and projections. And I was in a meeting with a banker, and he asked me about what the company does and how they do it. And I was embarrassed that I didn't know it, didn't know the answer. I knew the numbers, but I was kind of in a silo. So after that point in time, I didn't like the fact that I was embarrassed. I took the time to really understand what each client did and how they did it, from their strategy, their mission statement, their products, their customers, pricing. So I could really then add value. I would even go to Walmart or Home Depot, if that's where the clients' products were, and look at their products on the shelf, talk to the salespeople, look at their packaging, and then go back to the customer, to the client, and say, look, I know about that. And so that curiosity then kind of formed the basis of the consulting side of what I do.
So interesting. I love that you touched on curiosity. I think that's huge. And then also always adding to your building blocks for learning and development. Some really great takeaways with that. So fast forward to your role here at Whitley Penn. Let's talk about the specific group you lead, which is Strategic Consulting Services, and what y'all focus on and the services your group provides.
Sure. So prior to joining Whitley Penn, which I've had a relationship with 15 years, referring business to each other, and that's through the relationships, I was on my own, acting as a fractional CFO. So going to companies and helping them, but I didn't have a team. And I really started missing not having people to work with, collaborate with, but more importantly, develop. And so the opportunity came to join Whitley Penn and start this new service line, which is basically helping companies, investors, board of directors, management, to improve their operating and financial performance. It sounds a lot of words, but really how to make companies more profitable and help our clients achieve their goals and dreams is kind of what we do. And we do that really to develop a relationship, being the trusted advisor, where they trust us to look at their overall business, and we focus on ways to improve profitability, make companies more efficient. We do some strategic kind of fractional CFO work, and we also do coaching and mentoring. So we help develop our client staff to be, further educated and know it. So we come in and teach them. So we're not a permanent solution. We're coming in, showing them, teaching them, and so they feel like they're getting value on their side of it. And then our relationships, last years, because we actually become a subset of their team.
Yeah, you're educators and empowerers.
Yeah,
I love that.
I like the way you say that.
So you mentioned kind of, you were on your own with no team, and you were kind of missing that whole collaboration and development aspect. So what excites you most about the work you get to do and the team and practice you are building here at Whitley Penn?
Yeah, so I really get excited when clients come back and say, "Hey, you really changed our family dynamic. We achieved our goals, and you are a part of it." so we enjoyed that. The majority, if not all, of our clients come from referrals. So from a happy customer who years later say, hey, these guys helped us do this, they can help you. And so that, to me, to get a referral, just it makes me so excited and happy for that, as well as from centers of influence, from having a team, especially some younger folks, to be able to kind of share some of my experiences and struggles early on and how I overcame them, and show them the aspect of networking and building relationship, introducing them to some of my contacts, who then introduce them to the younger folks that are more their age, and seeing them develop. That makes me happy. I enjoy doing that.
Yeah, certainly a fun part of the process. Yeah. So let's get into the go-giver mentality. This is specifically what I was hinting at with finding the joy in what we got to do earlier. I remember when you first joined the firm, you were already so supportive of some of the LinkedIn professional development videos I do. And y'all, Frank is a great cheerleader, which I think is a great quality to have. So thank you for your continuous support on that. But soon after, you reached out to me about this book, The Go-Giver, which I then ordered immediately, read it in a day. It's certainly a great story, easy read, but packs a big message. So tell us about when you got your first copy. Did someone encourage you to read it? And after you read it for the first time, did you know it was a mentality that you wanted to adopt right away?
Yeah, so the Go-Giver is a little red book. So it's been about 15 years ago. I attended a lunch meeting, focus on business development, building relationships. And at the end, we were given a copy of the Go-Giver. The meeting wasn't about the Go-Giver. It was just something they provided afterwards. And it's written by Bob Berg and David Mann. And it's a little story about a powerful business idea. It's 60, 70 pages. It's an easy read. And like most books that I've read, I get really excited about it. And like, this is the book. And I agreed with the philosophy and so forth. But like most books prior to that, I would then put it on the shelf and go on and forget it and read another book and go to another book. And so for a couple of years, I did nothing with it. I enjoyed the book. I agreed with the principles, philosophies, but it was just another book, and I put it aside. It wasn't until several years later that I was trying to come up with a strategy that red book just kind of screamed at me, and I picked it up again. And then from there, I started incorporating it into a strategy and philosophy that I follow today.
And now you pass it out as well. How many copies have you given out?
Not really counting. I'd say 300.
Wow.
And, now it's to a point people like Kindle and so forth, so they can get their own book.
Yeah. Well, I hope Bob and John are listening. You got a great customer and a great supporter, So in your own words, what is the go-giver mentality?
It's basically helping others and providing value without any expectation of receiving something in return. And being true to yourself, being authentic, and placing other people's interests first. And the overall punchline for me was going from being a transactional person to building relationships.
Yeah, I think it's really straightforward, right?
Mm-hmm.
Easy to replicate. Mm-hmm. Anyone can do it. So do you think the go-giver mentality is something you are born with, or is it more something you nurture over time?
I think both. I mean, the go-giver, really, it's about being a good guy, right? So we all want to be part of it, so we have that. So I think we're born with parts of it, but we don't know how to apply it, especially in the business world. So I think over time, you nurture it, and then it's more of becoming consistent with it and building a brand, because we all are good people, but then you get into business and life and so forth, and you don't think those principles apply directly. So I think it's over time you kind of adopt it and nurture it and then become consistent with it.
Yeah. Do you find there's any shift maybe in business, how we do it today, where we're starting to get more into that, or?
I think it's always there. I think, it's a philosophy, it's a mindset. And so for me, several years after reading it, I found myself in a pure business development role. And so I would basically set up 3-4 lunch coffee meetings a day throughout. And so meet people for 45 minutes to an hour. And I got a little frustrated in the sense that people would ask you, what do you do? What's your title? And I found myself then, occupying the time, basically talking about me and my resume. And at the end of the meeting, and they did the same, I knew nothing about you and you knew nothing about me. So how are we going to do business together? So from that point on, I said, I'm going to make this about how I approach business. And so I would shift that and I would say, Danielle, that's a great question. However, let me tell you about how I treat my clients, what my business philosophy is, and so forth, and kind of go through some of the Go-Giver. And so that way they got to know me. And then at the end, I would hand them a book. And they would read the book and then call me. And so I became known as the Go-Giver, the guy with the little red book and, things of that nature. But it shifted from being about me and telling you how great I am to more about how I treat others and serve others.
I love that way. Like you said, you go to a lot of networking events and it really is what's your name, what's your title, what you do. But I love that you touched on it. It's something that sets you apart too. And it's how people remember meeting you, at an event where you're meeting a ton of different people. So what stage in your career does adopting a go-giver mentality provide the most benefit?
So I think everyone should adopt it regardless of what stage you're in. I mean, a college student, first day on the job, throughout your career. It's just different aspects of it that get incorporated. But I think everybody should have or adopt a philosophy of how you want to conduct business and really how you want others to view you. What's your brand type to stand out? So for me, I wanted to be viewed as a trusted advisor. And I was going to focus on not only some of the principles in the Go-Giver, but following up to build relationships. So just being a good guy and incorporating these principles, that's one part of it. But then what do you do next? Right. So for me, it was following up. I'm going to send handwritten notes to thank you. I'm going to follow up on LinkedIn. I'm going to remember things. I'm going to send you a birthday wish and happy holidays and so forth. So I think it's things that everyone can do regardless of what stage of your career, if it's important to you. Everybody could write a handwritten note if it's important to you, or you could not.
So yeah, sort of a trick question, because something you can adopt at really any stage of your career. You just figure out what is most important to you. So do you have any fun stories to share with us about some specific examples where you witnessed the go-giver mentality in action?
Well, Danielle, I'm not sure I have any fun stories, but I do have some stories that stand out over the years. Early on, one of my clients asked me to meet with his son, who was a senior at A&M, studying accounting, and not sure what he wanted to do. We were helping his dad on a transaction. So I visited with him and shared some advice and gave him a copy of the Go-Giver. We met, for probably an hour and a half one time. And then I didn't hear from him. When we sold the client's business at the closing dinner, my client introduced me to his wife as the guy who helped their son. And she gave me a big hug and said, "Thank you. God bless you." Mm-hmm. She never mentioned the transaction, which they received a lot of money. It was about how I took the time and in an hour and a half, I said or did something that helped him. So that was very gratifying. And that's where I knew, okay, this stuff is important and it works. Some other cool things, I was part of a networking group in Dallas, and I was late to a meeting, and I walked in, and some people yelled out as hey, there's Pindar. And so Pindar is a reference to the Go-Giver as the guy. So that was pretty cool. Other times people have read, here's that guy, that people I didn't know at a network, that's the guy with the little red book and things of that nature. So another example is on my LinkedIn profile. I have somewhere in the middle or towards the bottom a section where it says that I provide complimentary mentoring, coaching, and career development services to college students, recent college graduates, and executives in transition. And then I participate in the TCU Energy Institute mentoring program. And what's interesting about that is when I meet a client or center of influence, they immediately want to know about that. They don't really care much about my previous roles or where I went to school or things of that nature. They're like, how did you get into that and why you do that? And I think that's pretty cool. And how can I get involved? And so that kind of reinforced the whole mentality that people want to know about you and your philosophy and how you help others versus your GPA, where you went to school, or what role you played in a company.
Yeah, so true. And I think, it reiterates the point that you never know when opportunities will come about. So you always need to be your authentic self, right? Whatever that may be. Do you think there are any similarities between being a go-giver and being a go-getter?
Yeah, I think they're both very focused on going after what you believe. The difference might be the go-getter, in my mind, works really hard to achieve their goals. And the go-giver shifts from getting to giving and putting other interests first and continually adding value, which ultimately leads to unexpected returns.
Yeah, I love that. So any other tips you can share with us regarding some successful habits to build in order to find true happiness in our own success and career development?
Well, I think in addition to always trying to provide value is, at least for me, and I've learned this over the years, is I want to be a net plus to an organization. And so what that means is I want to bring a lot of energy. I want to build relationships within the organization. I want to learn about the people I work with and their families and help where I can. I want to volunteer for new projects. But I think the biggest ingredient that has helped me over the years is a commitment to following up with people and always doing what I said. Yeah. And so I think we tend to go to networking events or meet people and check the box, and then we do nothing with it. And so I have a commitment that I'm going to immediately follow up. Years ago with a thank you note, handwritten thank you note, that not happening as much anymore. So with an email, and I want to be the first to say, hey, Danielle, it was a pleasure meeting you, and I look forward to finding ways to help each other. I'm then going to send you a LinkedIn connection with the same. And every communication that I have, every email, phone call, always ends the same way. Let me know how I could be most helpful to you. And so I think following up is something that most people don't do or don't do consistently. And so they're only doing half of the equation.
Probably, easy for it to get lost in this fast-paced world that we're living in, not even just industry. So I love that you just kind of take it back to the basics, right? We all know how to follow up, but it might be just a lost, valuable habit that we haven't continued to build upon. So I think that's a great tip. You've been around a lot of successful leaders in your career. Would you say they all have similar qualities? Maybe the go-giver mentality is one of them, or what else may set them apart?
Yeah, so over the years, I had the pleasure of working with some really talented people. And what I found was they had common characteristics, and they sprinkled that with some of the things that made them unique. So they weren't trying to be robotic. They formed their philosophy based on them, their personality, how they were being authentic. But some of the common themes are they're curious. They ask questions. They ask a lot of questions, and they're not afraid to ask questions. Where I think early on in my career, I felt like asking a question was admitting to a client that I didn't know it, and I was expected to know it. And so now every meeting I have is, hey, if you give me a whiteboard and a bottle of water, we're just going to ask a bunch of questions, and we'll kind of figure it out together. They're going to be good questions, bad questions, and if I don't understand it, I'm going to say, yeah, that doesn't really make sense to me. Can you repeat it? I don't think I would have ever done that early in my career. I would have been embarrassed to say I didn't know it. So I think being vulnerable is also something very important. Being authentic, being prepared, like doing your research before you meet somebody, get to know them a little bit. So therefore you have some questions to ask. But I think the overall theme is they truly care about their clients and employees and providing value. I don't think it's something you can consistently fake. And I think the overall theme is being consistent.
Yeah.
And so they may not be the smartest people. They're smart enough, but they're successful in building relationships.
Yeah.
And then as a result, there's an unlimited number of referrals that take place as your career develops.
And they're smart enough to know some of those other qualities probably, make a big difference. So connecting with people is huge, especially, in our industry and for our client service professionals. A big part of making connections is knowing your brand. What would you say your brand is, and what is most important to you?
So for me, it's to be viewed as a trusted advisor. And I want to be the first person that people turn to when they need help. And that may mean business help, or I need a recommendation for a doctor for my wife, or we're going on a trip, and I want to be someone that they look to turn to. And majority of the time, I probably won't have the answer, but I will refer them to someone who does, that would take the call and be receptive. And that kind of creates that universe of people helping one another.
Yeah. And that makes you smart, right? You know who to go to for the answers. Right. Does developing relationships come naturally to you, or do you think this was something you had or maybe still have to work on?
Definitely did not come naturally, and something I hated to do, quite honestly. Early in my career, I was very shy, and I had trouble speaking in public. Didn't like to do it. And the reason was, I think I was comparing myself to, these accomplished speakers, and I had to be like that, and I was afraid of failure. So I shied away from it. And when I did make a presentation, it was scripted in such a way that it wasn't very good. So I worked on it. I worked on it a lot until someone had told me, "Hey, Frank, you know what you're talking about. You know the information. Just be yourself, be authentic." And so what if you screw up? Mm-hmm. They're listening to you. And so I became more comfortable about who I was. And I wasn't never going to be a great speaker. But that never was my goal. I wanted to communicate my message. So I'll use my bad humor. I'll make bad jokes. I'm not a good joke teller, but that's who I was and I am. And as I became more comfortable with my own style, it helped continuously. But I still have to work on it. So quite honestly, I am very good at, after I meet a person and they get to know me, but that initial meeting is still something like, I don't want to do it. And so I'm scheduled to go to a lot of networking events, and I'm always thinking, well, I'm probably going to cancel. I don't want to go, and this and that. But I force myself to go, and it turns out great, and so forth. But I think it's something that you constantly have to work at.
Oh, yeah. And people can certainly see right through it when you're not being authentic. And I always like to say, no one knows what you were going to go in and say or present. Right. So just go with it.
Oh, wow.
You make a mistake.
You need to be my coach.
So do you think your brand has evolved over time? And if so, in what way?
Definitely it's evolved and continues to evolve. And I hope it will continue evolving in the future. So I think as I continue to build my network and gain confidence, I get more comfortable with it. And so I seek different opportunities to enhance it. So as an example, because this is probably one of the things that has helped me the most over the last 10 years, was I developed an interest in the energy oilfield service industry. And I would go to events in Houston, New York, and meet people. And after a while, figure out they were from Fort Worth. And I was like, why do we need to go across the country when we're here in Fort Worth? So I need to do something to get all of us together. So I started holding networking events for people who have an interest in that sector, but it was one where you just show up. There's no presentation, there's no speaker, it's just networking. And did the first one, and I was expecting 10 people, 100 people showed up. It was crazy. And so they asked me, when's the next one? And I'm like, there's really not a next one. I'm one and done, man. I'm leaving on a good, but I got a lot of interest. And so then I found out, how could I benefit others? So I partnered with the TCU Energy Institute, and we started combining efforts. And for the last 10 years, we've been holding networking events once a year where we've had 300-400 people show up from all over the country. And I would be the one kind of directing who knows who in what space. And it became a lot of fun, and people started knowing me as this guy who puts on events. And as a result of that, they would all invite me to their events. And then so my calendar was full. So I think, combining what you're doing with other organizations. So the brand was, hey, this guy knows a lot of people in the energy sector. And before that, there were groups or people I wanted to meet, and they wouldn't return my call. And after these events, they were like, hey, we need to meet Frank. And go to his event because there's a lot of people in the common space. And so that was a lot of fun. So that continues to evolve. And I think it'll continue to evolve going forward.
Yeah, I love that. So let's talk about failing forward. I love talking about this because it's something everyone will experience at any stage in their career. So tell me about some struggles that you experienced, whether as a young professional or maybe more recently, and some of your best tips for overcoming, learning from them, and progressing forward.
Sure. So early on, I struggled with confidence in public speaking. I thought I had to know it all, whether it be the best speaker or have the answer, even though, I was early in my career, and I compared myself to others. And so I didn't have a good gauge of where I should be in my career. And as a result of that, I think I avoided certain situations. Again, once I developed my own style, I became comfortable with my approach, things started to change. But I think everybody should have a coach, a peer group where they can go to. Early on, when I was Anderson, I had a project, the company going public, and I was doing the modelings, and I got sick a couple of days before, and I couldn't figure it out. And so I called some of my buddies at work, and they came to my apartment, and they took it over, no questions asked. And so having people you can rely on, because we're all going to fail, we're all going to go through storms, we're all going to feel insecure, but it's important to realize you're not the only one. Mm-hmm. And so I think that probably is the most important, having a group of people to help you overcome those. Yeah. And not being so hard on yourself.
And it sounds like those are lessons that you picked up early on in your career that still play an impact today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. So you are very involved on the mentorship side as well. You've mentioned it today, specifically for young professionals. Tell us about how you got started in this and what value it brings to you.
Sure. Started years ago. I have a couple friends that were professors at TCU, and they would ask if I would meet with some of their students who had an interest in some of the careers that I was involved with, whether it be investment banking or private equity, and if I would just sit down and, visit with them, tell them about it. And I did, and I enjoyed it immensely. I learned more from them than they learned from me. And then I was asked to be on a TCU mentoring program where you're assigned 1 or 2 students a semester, and you meet with them every few weeks and actually take them to your office and show them what you do and so forth. So I never thought I could add value to others like that, but evidently I did. And I would share with them the Go Giver and a couple other resources. And that's really what, just sharing resources that had helped me, and then introducing them to other people who could further help them with whatever they were pursuing. And so from that, it evolved more into executives in transitions. So people who had worked in the same job 25, 30 years, never networked, never looked for a job, and they didn't know how to dress, they didn't know how to resume, and I would connect them with other people. And it's something that I'm very passionate about, and I continue to do. And there's no shortage of people who want to be helped.
Mm-hmm. Are there any specific characteristics that you look for when deciding on who you may want to mentor?
Just about everyone is a referral from someone I know.
Mm-hmm.
And so if someone asks me to mentor someone's son or daughter or a friend, or I'll take it on. Yeah. Then it's a matter of continuing it. So in that initial meeting or two, I'll share some things you should do. You need to follow up and have a LinkedIn profile. And if they don't do some of those basic stuff, then either they don't want to be mentored anyway, but I probably won't continue. I'll give them a couple opportunities, but if they're not going to put the work in, then I'm probably not going to feel comfortable introducing them to other people.
Right. And I'm sure there's a lot you get to learn from these mentees
Absolutely.
as well. What excites you most for young professionals that are just getting started in their careers today?
So some of the things we talked about were harder to do 30 years ago, but with technology and LinkedIn and other resources, it's so much easier for a 22-year-old getting started to implement these things from day one. And so LinkedIn has been a big part. And, obviously you're an expert at this, Danielle, and I'm just getting started on it, but to build a network. And so I think technology is enabled anyone to take advantage of it, but there's so much opportunity available in different industries and so forth. So as long as young people are curious and ask a lot of questions, then they can do whatever they want. And one of the things that I tell young adults and students is you can always add value to somebody. It's just a different type of value. And so what I typically communicate is if you're a 22, 25-year-old meeting with a CEO, 55 or 60, you may feel like there's no way you can add value. But if you dig a little deeper and you understand what that CEO or CFO has, they probably have a daughter or son your age that's either looking at college or what degree or a job. I mean, if you offer to visit and help them, you're at top of the list to that executive. So we can all add value. It's just depending on where you're in your career, it's a different type of value. And understanding that, I think, is the most important part.
Yeah, I love that so much. So trends are, always changing, updating, and evolving. How do you stay updated on new trends, and what resources do you rely on to keep you sort of up to speed with what's going on, and how to stay connected within your profession or within your industry and just as a professional and a leader?
Yeah, so that's changed over time. I don't read, since I read a few books because those are the books that have been impactful. But over the years, I've developed a number of friends in different industries, in different countries, in different professions. And so I rely on my network where we have calls, and I may call someone in China and say, hey, what's happening in China or the manufacturing side? Or I'd call someone in New York and say, what are you seeing on the deal side? Or a banker, what's going on in the lending, and what do you see trends? So I rely on my network and have calls and rely that they did all the work to gather all the data and they can summarize it for me. And they rely on me as well.
Yeah.
And so it's all the part of that network in a different way to utilize it. So that's what I do.
Yeah, you look to the experts. I like that.
Yeah. And so, one of the things that early in my career that was really important, that really got me into all of this, is I was running a company and had some of my friends helping us, and it was a turnaround for private equity, and we spent 4 or 5 years, and all we did was work. And we had other friends or service providers calling us and wanting to meet with us, and we never took the time to take those calls. Fast forward a couple of years where we sold the company and I was looking for an opportunity, I would call those same people and they're like, hey, you weren't there for us. So at that point, I decided that networking was not something you do when you have time or a luxury. It's part of your DNA. And so I incorporated that into my everyday, not where most people, it's when they need something, and people know that.
Yeah. Such a good tip. And lastly, do you have any, maybe not books, maybe books, podcasts, TV shows, or just any resources you can leave our audience that have provided you value? And doesn't necessarily have to be regarding professional development or business, unless you have some, but what's bringing you value?
So there are 3 books that I've read over the years, and I try either monthly or quarterly to reread them. One is The Go-Giver we talked about. The other one is Getting Naked by Patrick Lencioni, which is more about asking a lot of questions versus telling people how great you are. And then probably the most important is a book called Monday Morning Leadership, 8 mentoring sessions you can't afford to miss by David Cottrell. Real basic. It talks about keeping the main thing at the top of the priority list.
Yep.
So those are books. A couple TV shows that I do enjoy watching that are related to finance. Billions, which I love, is about New York finance and private equity. Succession, family office, family dynamic. I enjoy watching those, and then it's just really hearing stories from other people and kind of struggles they went through and how they overcome it, and then incorporating that into what I do.
Yeah, I love that. And remember, the main thing is always
the main thing.
The main thing. So Frank, thank you again for joining me today. You know, you are the ultimate go-giver, and I know everyone will find tremendous value in this discussion and hopefully develop some new habits about the type of person and professional that they want to be. So thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Danielle. I appreciate it.